this brings up to be the question, like, why do we have emergency preparedness and food storage? The scripture is like, be prepared for situations and like, you shall not fear. I really liked that.
You like that? Because as a child, that was scary to me. How do I
if
know?
I'm righteous, like, what if I don't make the cut?
Hey everyone, welcome back to Saints Unscripted. Today you're here with Sabrina and Wilson and Brett.
Hola.
And we're going to be talking about emergency preparedness, specifically like food storage. As members of the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, we have been told before over the pulpit about the importance of emergency preparedness and food storage. It's like had moments where there was a lot of discussion about it, where there's less, where it comes back, where it alters. We kind of just want to have a discussion about that today. So
Yeah.
any initial thoughts about emergency preparedness?
So our producer pointed out something interesting about the history of this. Most of us, the majority of Over the Pulpit talks about this were in the 70s, 80s, and early parts of the 90s. So the three of us were not alive.
No.
Our relationship with it is our parents.
Yeah.
Both.
And during that time, our parents were young adults, getting their
Trying to
families
set
going.
their own families,
Yeah.
set their own
And-
traditions.
I grew up here. Sabrina, you?
Colorado.
And you grew up in Texas. All right, so we're all at least different states, but we're all in the west of the U.S.
This is fair.
It's
And also have to recognize, I think we all grew up in white, middle-class, suburban, kind of white picket fence kind of lives. So nothing like,
Mm-hmm.
really out of the ordinary, but also like not just in pretty standard American class circumstances.
The church has become more of a global church. Okay, so my history, like my relation to food preparedness is being like a 6-year-old going into our family's cold storage room, this cold, desolate cement place where I expected spiders to come out and bite me just spontaneously at any moment. And there were just huge buckets, like Home Depot sized buckets of grains and oats that I've never eaten in my entire life. And my mom would say, like, that's food storage. And I don't remember why they said we had it. Like, the Lord commanded us to be prepared. That's my relationship with it. And then 72-hour kits we had that had Jolly Ranchers in them. And
Love
my mom
those.
said you couldn't eat those. Like, they're for the emergency. That's where I'm at.
At least there's some candy to look forward
Life
to.
I know, that was
Life was so hard for young Brett. That's tough.
the burden that I carry. Yes.
Honestly, my experience is pretty similar. Like, I know for a long time, my family had like the same thing, huge white buckets, like Home Depot buckets of wheat. Because my mom loved to make her own bread, but also like it kind of doubled as food storage. We had like 1 million boxes of pasta in like our pantry. And I was always like, why do we have like 7 boxes of rigatoni?
We don't even eat pasta.
And I'm like, it's food storage. And I'm like, all right, sure.
It's food storage, whatever that
Whatever.
means. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can remember like my mom would like with a Sharpie write the month and year on everything so big. So you like walk in and you're like, okay, we have like 20 boxes of cake mix, but like you got to do this one. And then you have to go through sometimes and realize, all right, we missed the window on some of these things and have to throw them away.
You
Which
didn't miss
is-
the window. You're like 5 years past the window. Like,
Yeah,
Well, that's what I'm
sometimes.
saying.
least.
I feel like our family's go-to was to update the food storage for FHE. Like, we got nothing for home evening. Well, let's go to the 72-hour kids.
We would all
Like, let's
sit
go change out the
around
water
and do
bottles.
it,
Like,
yeah.
something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, question to start out. For anyone who's outside of the United States watching, do you have had that at all growing up? Because I'm curious what
That
it's
was,
like.
was food storage like emphasized by your area presidencies, like your steaks and things?
Yeah.
Curious about
Or
that.
even just like in your culture at all. I'm just a side note. I want to know.
So I guess one perspective, at least if we're talking outside of the US, so I served my mission in Sweden. And I do remember something that was interesting about emergency preparedness is whenever there was the initial attacks on Ukraine, whenever that whole conflict started between Ukraine and Russia. I mean, first off, I realized I looked at a map and I was like, whoa, Russia's a lot closer to Sweden than I remember. But this sparked a really interesting movement in the church in Sweden where around the entire country, meetings were held for all of the members to come and learn emergency preparedness and learn like evacuation and like what do we do if Russia invades. And this is something that I can't remember if it was put on by the area presidency, if it was just recommendations to all the stake presidents, but pretty much every congregation in the country had some sort of emergency preparedness meeting about what do we do if Russia invades. I just thought that was really interesting. And they touched on 72-hour kits, food storage, emergency preparedness, the principles that we've been taught, but just not necessarily emphasized recently. But it was brought back pretty strongly for them.
Pretty relevant in that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, like, because I served in Germany, and in Germany, there's definitely a history of evacuating and, rough things happening. So I wonder, like, I for some reason, I can't remember if they have like intense food storages. I mean, a lot of their homes are really small, and I feel like, they don't have the middle class American homes that they have in Germany. So I don't know. I don't really remember what's there. And like with grocery stores, just like missionaries, as missionaries, we go to the grocery store and buy our week's worth of food. And even that seemed like a lot. Like the cashiers were like, that's a lot of food.
That's the thing. Like in Sweden too, like it was structured a lot differently than the United States, where they have a lot of tiny little supermarkets everywhere. And a lot of people would just go and just buy their food for the day. And they'd buy food for dinner in the morning and make it at night. And then they'd go again in the morning, buy food for the night, because that was just part of their routine. And so it's true, like having 1 day a week to buy your food, people thought that was kind of strange. Like having, and like members told us, I don't know how you guys do that. How you guys buy enough food for 1 week. So I'm sure teaching that principle of have enough food for if you couldn't get food for months on end would probably be a little strange to them.
Yeah. Interesting thoughts. But like if you live in these places and you want to correct us, I appreciate that as well.
So the church, on one of its many websites, there's a section about preparedness, and it starts with the scripture from D&C, if ye are prepared, ye shall not fail. And this brings up to be the question, like, what is the origin of this? Like, why do we have emergency preparedness and food storage? And the scripture is like, be prepared for situations, and like, you shall not fear. Like, that's a promise from God and the scriptures. I really liked that. But
you like that? Because as a child, that was scary to me. Is that that my parents would always say, they're like, horrible things are going to happen, and there's going to be tornadoes and all this stuff. But if you are prepared, if you're righteous, you don't need to fear. And I'm like, how do I know?
If I'm righteous, like, what if I don't make the cut?
I'm like, how can I not fear if it's scary stuff happening?
Like there's going to be pestilence, wars, disease, but don't worry, like your backpack, your 72-hour kit will save you. Like that'll, like, don't even worry. Don't be scared.
Mom and Dad
We're
might
ready.
not make it, but you can take our rations. But yeah.
Anyways, continue.
Well, no, you guys got me thinking on the thing of, I love post-apocalyptic things. I love that. I don't know why. Talking about like horror stories in that other episode that we filmed.
Seeing a common thread here.
There is a common thread. I love them. I don't want to experience any of them. But I think maybe it was the Cold War in the US in the 70s and 80s. But I think emergency preparedness and food storage has been associated a lot with the end of days and the apocalypse. And I wasn't there to listen to all those talks in the 70s and 80s. And food storage and emergency preparedness may very well help people as the end of days begins. But I don't necessarily think those two need to be tied together, nor should they be. Natural disasters and wars are like striking right now indiscriminately.
And have been for the beginning of time.
Yes, and have been for a very long time. Like, these principles are important not just if the world is ending. They're important just to be prepared for natural disasters. And also, maybe don't go overboard. Like, don't spend a huge amount of your life savings on bunkers.
Really?
Yes. Wilson's like,
might
that
have
down
to,
payment, like,
not the bomb shelter. Oh, okay.
Okay, but what would your advice be for people who, live in an apartment? They can't, a lot of us can't afford homes, or we don't have a lot of extra space to put the food, or we don't have a lot of extra income to go out and buy all this stuff that might go bad and might never be consumed. Like, what are we supposed to do?
Dave Ramsey, first piece of advice, cut up your credit cards. Second piece of advice, we're going to put 25%. Just kidding. No. Also doesn't work anymore. All right.
No.
Next thing, what to do. I think they've talked about this. I have actually heard people say, as circumstances of the church have changed, you don't need to have, like in a small apartment, like 30 years worth of food storage.
or
like have a 72-hour kit and maybe
it?
have like a couple extra cans of stuff, or like a couple extra bags of flour.
Yeah.
I feel like if we're talking like bare necessities, I do think that a 72-hour kit, like it's just a good life principle, right? To be prepared to have something to survive, something quick to grab in case of a fire. Or like, I grew up in Texas, right? And so we were in the middle of Tornado Alley in North Texas. So like anytime there was a tornado touching down nearby, we would always like gather in the closet, gather in like a little tornado shelter type closet in the middle of the house. And we'd have our 72-hour kits there in the case of our home getting destroyed or getting torn up or something, or like
Mm.
our belongings being lost. Like it happens kind of frequently, which sucks. Or also in event of a hurricane, which also happens in Texas. But like I would say, if we're talking bare necessities, like I did appreciate having that. So like we weren't just like completely at a loss if something were to happen.
Yeah.
But I feel like then again, investing hundreds, thousands of dollars into 10, 20 years worth of food storage in the case of an apocalyptic event may not be highest priority right now. But
Yeah. And with a 72-hour kit too, I think that some people might even think of that as daunting initially, because if you have a real like beefed up 72-hour kit that's got like absolutely everything someone could need for 72 hours, that also can be pricey. I feel like having, starting a 72-hour kit, like having what you can is better than having nothing. Like you have, I don't know, like one extra pair of clothes instead of 3 if you have, I don't know what I'm
there's
saying,
no
but
extra
I'm
clothes.
just saying they don't need to be perfect to be
just what you got.
helpful.
Yeah.
Wear your racks. No, I think it's true, right? Like it doesn't have to be anything crazy. Like we had like water, protein bars, spare underwear, like nothing crazy, but just
Yeah.
enough so that we wouldn't be miserable in 72 hours. We could get help, make our way to family members or something, just enough to be okay for 72 hours. Nothing crazy.
Great advice. As in all things, these principles need to be understood spiritually. Like exactly what you do, you need to find out what works for your family. Like you need to have preparedness stuff. Like how much could you spend or devote towards this? Like that's something the Lord would help consult upon. Like if you're about to buy that bomb shelter, maybe
I was really banking on the bomb shelter though. Like,
Yeah.
I was feeling pretty committed, but
it can be your man cave now, Wilson.
oh,
Plan B. We'll have to
alright.
put some windows in. That might be more expensive.
We'll throw some LEDs in there. It'll be fine.
But anyways, if you are prepared, you shall not fear.
Yeah.
You didn't like that. It sounds like you did not. Sabrina's like, I did not like where we went on this. It's like, let me bring this back.
Well, okay, just that it feels like recently in the church we are learning more about just being self-reliant and setting aside some money or for an emergency, or just like having a plan for if you find yourself in a position where you don't have a job anymore. Like, how will you continue? How will you keep going? Being somewhat self-reliant, learning about self-reliance, that's important for people of all spectrums of economic stability.
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think it is interesting to look, like, Brett, kind of what you were talking about earlier, kind of like the history of this sort of emphasis in the church of emergency preparedness and self-reliance, and seeing that there has been a bit of a resurgence since the pandemic. You could attribute that to just in general as being in a pandemic situation would naturally cause that rise, or whether this is like a divinely prompted sort of resurgence in self-reliance and emergency preparedness. But I do feel like it has been emphasized more and more recently, as opposed to, I don't know, in the 2010s.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. Well, there's, more people could talk about emergency preparedness. Let us know how much you have prepared. Not how much. Let us know
Every single can. I want to know.
We would like an inventory.
Let us know what your emergency
I wanna
preparedness
see the
looks
Excel spreadsheet.
3
like.
boxes of macaroni.
And
7 boxes of rigatoni.
anyways, while you're here, watch this video and
Leave some comments that we can later comment on.
yeah.